iconic villains who decided, or in some cases were forced, to team up, like Magneto and Sabretooth, while others you never would have suspected to be villains, like longtime ally Moira Mactaggert. Why do villains sometimes turn good? Magneto is of course one of the most important villains for us to mention here. He joined the X-Men at the behest of Charles Xavier. In the comics, this happened when Charles was forced to leave Earth due to him being on his deathbed. He went to Shi'ar space to heal, and in his absence Magneto took over his role as headmaster of the Xavier School, and ended up becoming the teacher and leader of the New Mutants team as well. Magneto has joined up to work with the X-Men a few times actually, but I think the first time that he took Charles's place as the leader of the school and mutant group is honestly one of the most iconic. Since then, Charles and Eric have also teamed up in the X-Men 97 animated series, and have also recently teamed up in modern comics as well, working together to usher in a new era of prosperity for mutants on Krakoa. Well, at least until Magneto left to go to planet Arakko, aka Mars, and Fall of X happened, and it kind of just all came toppling down. If you could see anyone else take Professor X's place with the X-Men, who would you want to see in that role leading them and guiding them? Honestly, I kinda think Dr. Doom could be interesting. We've seen him act as the leader of his own mutant team in Latveria, and I personally just found that really intriguing. Also, I just really like Dr. Doom. Juggernaut is a non-mutant and usually a longtime X-Men villain, but that hasn't stopped him from joining the team. Juggernaut is also amazingly strong, being imbued with power from the Gem of Cyttorak, for whom he acts as an avatar and a servant, serving Cyttorak's will. Cyttorak, however, recently became powerless to control Juggernaut, aka Kane Marco. Recently, Juggy left Cyttorak's service to strike out on his own, but still was able to keep his power through remnants of Cyttorak's presence. Basically, he used materials that Cyttorak left on Earth, and Juggernaut was able to use those to construct new armor for himself, and thereby harness Cyttorak's power through this, without actually being beholden at all to the demon god. Usually when we think of X-Men, we do not think of Apocalypse. Or well, you know, we may think of Apocalypse, but only in regards to him being one of the main villains of the team, not one of their most powerful and intimidating members or allies. However, the first Apocalypse isn't the only Apocalypse that we've had out there. Evan Sabanur is actually the clone of Apocalypse, who would take for himself the name of Genesis. And in fact, we later learned that he isn't even really the only Genesis either, with Apocalypse's wife weirdly also being known by that name, it turns out. Kinda strange. Genesis might yet be as powerful as someone like Apocalypse, but it's also possible that he has the potential to be even stronger than the original as time goes on. He also happens to be a bona fide hero, fun fact, for the most part. Minus when he had his alignment swapped in Axis, but you know, other than that, yeah, he pretty much sticks to heroics and even ends up joining the X-Men. In New Mutants, we saw an interesting turn in the series when we got two different Marauders teams. We have the classic, more older, established New Mutants who are often dealing with bigger missions out in the world or space, and a team of New Mutants who were seemingly brought together by the Shadow King. It seemed initially like the Shadow King actually might be turning over a new leaf here on Krakoa, but the truth of his nature was revealed when he ended up killing Gabby Kinney, aka Scout. No. However, the New Mutants would find out about his treachery and sought to defeat the Shadow King for once and for all, and they actually succeeded with the Shadow King dying, but leaving Amal Farouk alive, which meant that he was finally free of the Shadow King's influence. And if you don't know, Amal Farouk is one of the people that we have often known as the Shadow King. This allowed him though to become an ally as opposed to a villain, now free from that darker influence which once manipulated him. Spiral has been an enemy of the X-Men, but would also become a member of Storm and Psylocke's X-Force team. She was a human known as Rita Hayward who would end up in the Mojoverse and become part of a time paradox basically, having been attacked by her future mutated self, Spiral. She was a stunt woman who ended up falling in love with Longshot during his time on Earth and returned with him to the Mojoverse. When his plan to defeat Mojo ultimately failed, Rita was captured and was modified by Mojo to have 6 arms, one of which was completely cybernetic, becoming, yes, her future self, Spiral. Spiral herself is part cyborg, part human mutate as a result of the modifications that were performed on her. She was the one responsible acting as an agent of Mojo for giving Psylocke her cybernetic eyes so that Mojo could basically spy on the X-Men and, you know, get all those sweet ratings. When it comes to our next X-Men villain turned kind of X-Men ally, this all went down after and kind of before Sabretooth himself had actually died. Having his alignment reversed during Axis, Victor Creed got to keep it that way and ended up as a member and even the leader of his own version of X-Force, known as Weapon X-Force. He was killed as the last sacrifice to be used to basically bring back and resurrect William Stryker, yet even after this, Sabretooth was determined to not allow Stryker back into the world of the living. In the afterlife, he confronted Stryker, who is all ready to just cross back over, assuming Sabretooth would of course be his last sacrifice that he needed. But Victor surprised him when he just blatantly refused. Sabretooth took off Stryker's head in retaliation and instead chose to sacrifice his own soul for the life of his son Graydon Creed, who instead was resurrected in Stryker's place. So he still sacrificed himself, sacrificed his soul, but this time for his son. Pretty cute. The cost of this, however, was Sabretooth's goodness. He became feral and villainous again, but instead of being kept in hell to be tormented, he was released back into the world of the living by basically Azazel. Mystique is an interesting character, not normally someone you think of as being an X-Men member, and to be honest, while she has joined the team before, she's also almost just as often turned around to betray them, tragically. Actually, I think every time Mystique joins them, she betrays them. Mystique has joined up with the team before and even seemingly been interested in repenting and changing her ways, but of course, when it comes to Mystique, the greater good has never really been a purpose that she has aligned with herself, instead choosing to operate based on her own personal motives. Mystique has joined the team both up front as well as while in disguise, infiltrating the X-Men without them knowing her true identity. At least, not at first. Madelyne didn't just end up joining the X-Men recently, she also kinda gotta lead the team. Well, a non-official version of the team anyways, but I'm still gonna count it because it's pretty cool and I just love that it happened. This all went down during the Dark X-Men series. Here, Maddie was one of the mutants left on Earth who decided to take revenge for all that had happened to the mutants of Krakoa by putting together her own team and striking back, basically against Orcus, all while acting as Earth's mutant protectors. Now granted, she was not the best at superheroics, but at least, you know, she's trying here. And she did have Alex, aka Havoc, to remind her to avoid, you know, maiming and killing her opponents. Like, we're supposed to be X-Men, Maddie. During Dark X-Men, Maddie also wielded her own demonic version of Cerebro, which she dubbed the Mercy Crown, which allowed her to connect with all the souls of the surviving mutants of Earth following the events of the 2023 Hellfire Gala. In the more recent Inferno, it was revealed to fellow mutants that Moira Mactaggert was alive and well, and that she in fact had been a mutant this whole time. The truth comes out about this and is revealed to Emma Frost, whom Professor X and Magneto finally decided to trust with their secret, especially as we now have to deal with, you know, the return of Destiny. However, it turns out that Emma is not as understanding of their secrecy as they had hoped. As such, they instead make an enemy out of the White Queen, who seemed to be leaning more towards allying herself with Destiny and Mystique in coming days. Moira, on the other hand, had her own way of dealing with what was going on, based on her own secret motives. We later come to learn, while Moira had been a longtime ally of the X-Men throughout her history, that she actually ended up being revealed as a longtime villain who had been driven mad by her mutant reincarnation powers over the years and had been infiltrating the mutant group, playing the long con in an attempt to, well, basically destroy all mutants for good. Mimic is a mutant, but one who gained his abilities after knocking over a beaker accidentally in his father's lab, which caused a chemical reaction that created a strange red gas which he inhaled. Ooh, powers. His powers allow him to mimic the ability and skills of other beings within a certain distance of him. Increased exposure to others' abilities seems to also grant him more permanent adaptations of said powers. It wasn't for sure confirmed that Mimic was in fact a mutant until actually more recently in the comics, despite years of history and people long believing that he probably was one, with him being confirmed as such during, like I said, recently, the House of X. Prior to this, we were led to believe initially that he was a human whose DNA had been genetically altered, because, you know, everything that happened to him before, and then he got his powers. While not appearing often in the comics, Mimic, aka Calvin Rankin, is a character who has been around actually since the 60s, and first appeared in X-Men issue 19, where fans were introduced to him and the question was posed of whether or not Mimic was a mutant or something far worse. Turns out Mimic is a mutant. Mimic is a longtime villain of the X-Men who did for a time play the role of hero and has served on both the heroic X-Men team as well as Norman Osborn's Dark X-Men team during the events of Dark Reign. He's done it all. He's been an evil X-Men member and a good X-Men member. That's about it. I'm your host Amanda McKnight. Until next time, you stay nerdy.